Hey guys, this is Khavrion here with another battle report. This is for round 4 of Vaulsc's Sectorial Cup, and will feature me as Steel Phalanx against SneakySnake playing Tunguska in a game of EDX Ops. As a reminder, the Sectorial Cup is a TTS league by Vol with the special rule that everybody has to play a Sectorial. The reason for this is pretty straightforward. In the highly competitive infiNity meta right now, there are a handful of really powerful lists that act as sort of like a black hole, warping everything around them. If you come up against one of these black hole lists and you're running something more normal, then you're going to be at a disadvantage because of how good these other lists are. And because most of these black hole lists are in vanilla, the hope is by restricting everyone to sectorials, we can break people out of the funk of, feeling like we have to play the same lists over and over and over again. Now, keen viewers of the channel will note that the big boy list in Steel Phalanx is one of those black hole meta lists, and because Steel Phalanx is a sectorial, I could be running that list in this event. However, instead of doing that, I have taken the opportunity to go a little bit outside of my comfort zone and experiment with Atalanta and the Agema, both in hidden deployment. What's exciting to me about this battle report is that my game against SneakySnake gave me a really good opportunity to experiment with Atalanta and the Agema doing what they were meant to do. And in that sense, it gives me an opportunity to assess their quality. I also want to remark that SneakySnake's list in the context of the Sectorial Cup appears to be doing exactly what Vol hoped it would do. In particular, SneakySnake's list looks like effectively a more balanced, less busted version of the traditional vanilla nomads list. As we'll see when we look at it, it has many of the same pieces, but doesn't end up being oppressive or a black hole that absolutely warps the meta. That's not to say restricting to sectorials is a perfect solution. We've talked about in previous battle reports how my sectorial Steel Phalanx is still really good, even though I'm not running big boys. But it does show that the thing that makes the Vanilla Nomads meta list particularly oppressive is the access to a whole bunch of busted profiles. Remove many of those busted profiles and you get something that feels similar to play against, but isn't busted good. In fact, as long as we're talking about this, let's jump straight into the lists rather than review the mission. Here, I believe, is what SneakySnake was running. The groupings might be a little bit off, there might be some minor detail changes, but in broad strokes, this is it. And in my opinion, what this is a Tunguska version of a vanilla list. In particular, there are no fire teams, you don't really take advantage of any increased availability, and there are many units that could be replaced with cheaper, better equivalents if you had access to them in vanilla. That's not to throw any shade on SneakySnake, by the way. Instead, the point is to remark that these busted good units that you would use if you had access to them smother any other things, and I think that's what kind of stifles list building creation. So with all that in mind, let's go ahead and go through this. To start off, I'll talk about all the units which you absolutely would pick in vanilla because they're really good. You've got the Puppet Master in the common combination of one Flashballs guy, one AP Marksman guy. You've got a Heckler with a Fast Panda. You've got a Total Reaction Bot. Everybody does get the Total Reaction Bot, but it is common to choose it in that Vanilla Nomads list, and so I'm calling it out here. You've then got the Salamander Tag, perfectly good tag with a Hyper Rapid Magnetic Cannon, and you've got a Vertigo Zond with Missile Launcher. All of these are staples of meta Vanilla Nomads. Next, I want to call out profiles that would be on the chopping block for replacement if you went into vanilla. The Clockmaker is on the chopping block. He's just really expensive for what he provides, and a Monster Trucker does nearly the same job for cheaper. The Interventor Lieutenant is more or less replaced with Jazz, who is cheaper and who is better, who comes with Billy, and if Jazz dies, you don't go into Lost Lieutenant. These Cheer Killers are actually 2 substitutions away from being what I would consider competitively viable. In Nomads Vanilla, you could take Jaguars who do more or less the same job but are cheaper and have smoke. Except you don't take Jaguars because instead you'll take Morlocks who are even more cheaper and who are impetuous and thus can throw that smoke impetuously. It's also my opinion that these 2 motorized bounty hunters would be on the chopping block if you were in vanilla because you could replace them either with Morlocks who are cheaper and have smoke or with the Uberfall Commando. Morlocks and Uberfall Commando aren't exactly the same thing as motorized bounty hunters, but in the context of this list, the motorized bounty hunters are intended as a fast attack piece, and I think in the context of fast attack pieces, the Uberfall Commando is obviously phenomenal, and Morlocks are cheaper and have smoke and can be fast too. So what are we left with that doesn't want to get replaced in Vanilla Nomads? Well, there's the 2 Transductor Zons, but these guys are also available in Vanilla and sometimes are taken in Vanilla, so I'm not sure that's a great analog. And we are left with a Heckler killer hacking device. This dude is a forward deploying camo marker specialist with an assault pistol, and he is unique among the Hecklers in that his killer hacking device lets him return to marker state. I honestly quite like this guy. He pretends to be the other Heckler while also giving you midfield button push potential, and the assault pistol is a fairly dangerous gun if need to be used in a pinch. Now, Hecklers are availability too in Vanilla, so you could take this guy in Vanilla, and you probably would take him if you didn't fill up your 15 slots with other dudes that were even more busted. You could argue that the Moran fills the same slot as this guy, and if you were in Vanilla, you'd definitely drop the Heckler in order to take a Moran, but those two pieces are, in my opinion, different enough that I don't want to make a one-for-one comparison between them. All of which is to say, if I look at this list, the only dude that either isn't something you take all the time in Vanilla or is something that you replace with stuff that gets taken all the time in Vanilla is this Heckler hacker killer hacking device guy. Everything else is more or less something you'd find in Vanilla. To solidify the point, let's briefly look at the meta Nomads list that I think Lobo has been playing a whole bunch. As in Sneaky's Tunguska list, you have the Puppet Masters, you have the Vertigo Zond, you have the Salamandra, you have 1 Transductor Zond, you have the Reaction Zond, you have the Heckler, you have the Monster Trucker instead of the Clockmaker, and you've swapped out some things for the stuff that I was talking about, like the Interventor has been swapped out for Jazz and Billy. Notice that Jazz and Billy cost 25 together, whereas the Interventor costs 24 on its own. That's just disgusting. 2 Moderators fill out your Lieutenant slots. One of these, I guess you could argue, fills in, I don't know, maybe the Cheer Killer or something, but the point is that they're there. And then instead of taking things like the Cheer Killers and the Motorized Bounty Hunters and stuff like that, instead you've got, Morlock, Uberfall Commando, 2 Morans with repeaters, and so on. All of which is to say that Sneaky's list is kind of like the Vanilla Nomads meta list without being a black hole. You've got the firepower of the Salamandra, you've got the Puppet Tactica, you've got fast attack pieces, and you've got midfield specialists and some sort of midfield repeaters, which you can use with your Interventor, but you're not able to fill the entire list with hyper lean, hyper optimized profiles like you can in Vanilla. As a result, I don't think you would be disappointed or feel like you're playing with one hand tied behind your back if you showed up to a tournament with a A tier faction like JSA or something like that. You wouldn't feel bad if you were running up against something like this, whereas I think you kind of would feel bad if you were running up against something like Vanilla Nomads. Thus, to me, the comparison of this list with its oppressive Vanilla Nomads analog demonstrates that the source of the problem is busted profiles. In other words, if you're feeling like infiNity list building is calcified and stifled, then I think what needs to happen is you need to fix the busted profiles. You need to make those profiles more expensive or have reduced capabilities or have reduced availabilities. And if you did all that, I suspect, at least this comparison sort of demonstrates, that you'd end up with a healthier game. And what has happened here is that because Sneaky is restricted to being Tunguska, he has come up with a list that is more balanced. And, that was Vaulsc's entire reason for running the Sectorial Cup with the restrictions that you have to be a Sectorial. In that sense, good job with this list. Good job with the restriction to Sectorials. Everything here, I think, is a really good success as far as experimentation goes. What is also a good experiment is my list in the context of this game. As I've mentioned before, this list is essentially a 2 fire team big boy adjacent list, where I have gutted the fire teams in order to take Atalanta in hidden deployment and an Agima marksman in hidden deployment. I wanted to use the Sectorial Cup as an opportunity to step just a little bit outside my comfort zone, and my intent with this list was to try a couple of different ideas with the hidden deployment MSV2 units that Steel Phalanx got in the Blackwind update. The Agima Marksman Missile Launcher guy is pretty straightforward. He is effectively a trap card that reveals and takes a pot shot, and he can't be stopped by smoke. However, he has essentially no active turn use because Burst 1 is simply not high enough. Yes, I could outrange an opponent and I could throw smoke down so that they're at -6, but even so, Burst 1 is still just very risky, which is something that we're going to see. On the other hand, Atalanta in active turn is much better. She's Burst 2 on 18s, she can see through the smoke, and coming out of hidden deployment, she is completely safe from my opposition. There is nothing my opponent can do to kill Atalanta while she's in hidden deployment because, well, she's in hidden deployment. And my thinking was I put her in group 1 so that she has access to these, 10 orders with which to do DZ to DZ gunfighting. And with those orders, she could maybe take out an enemy tag or lots of enemy ARO pieces that would otherwise be difficult for Steel Phalanx to deal with. So the things we're experimenting with are Atalanta as an active turn gunner, the Agima as a trap card with limited active turn potential, and these are things which we will get a chance to experiment with in this game. I realize I haven't yet talked about the mission. I'll do that briefly, but I'll do it while looking at the map. The mission is EDX Ops. I believe that stands for Electronic Dance Expo. And in this mission, there are 5 buttons you have to push in order to turn the music toward your station. One here, one here, one here, one here. These are the standard supremacy positions, and then there's one in the center of the table. In addition to all that, there is a mosh pit in the center represented by an objective room. You also want to dominate the mosh pit at the end of the game. Now, I say at the end of the game, this is actually a Vaulsc mission, so instead of being at the end of the game, points are going to be scored at the end of each of the 2 players' final turns. So at the end of player 1's turn 3, you're going to score the buttons and you're going to score the mosh pit, and at the end of player 2's final turn, again, you score the buttons and you score the mosh pit. The idea behind scoring it this way is instead of making the game be about hiding until the absolute last possible second and then denying your opponent all the points that they work so hard to score, instead there is going to be some more interactivity where as player 1 you have the opportunity to stop player 2 and vice versa. I do think that that method of scoring does bias things in favor of the person going first just a little bit, but I'm not going to stress too much about that right now in the context of this mission. What I do want to stress is this absolutely beautiful map and the way in which it allows ARO firepower to be present and relevant in the game without being completely oppressive. My buddy Gyro put this map together. It is completely symmetric, which I think is really cute, and it ends up being really, really good. So for starters, you'll notice that all 4 objectives, I guess all 5 objectives, are in this center ring, which means that if you have ARO pieces like the Salamandra sitting right here, those ARO pieces can contest the ability of the opposition to go push the buttons. Also, it's not really easy to get access to these buttons without coming in, I guess you could come in through this way, but it's much more efficient to interact within the center of the board, like by going this way in order to push those buttons. Thus, if you brought ARO pieces, you can put them up and they will very much affect the ability of your opponent to get the game done. However, none of the fire lanes are so long or so obnoxious as to make an ARO piece utterly oppressive. If you want to avoid your opponent's ARO pieces, you can proceed along the side or along this side, or if you want to sort of have a middling interaction, you can bypass these long, narrow fire lanes like this long, narrow fire lane by either, taking a cautious move or throwing one smoke in order to get past long, narrow fire lanes and getting access to maybe the middle. Thus, what Gyro has built is a map in which ARO pieces like snipers are going to be very present, but there is no Pride Rock or Fort Asshole inside one deployment zone just utterly dominating the whole board, making you sad if you didn't bring an anti-sniper piece. All told, it's a really nice design, which I think is really cool, and it'll give me an opportunity to test out Atalanta and the Agima marksman really, really well. Taking you right into the game, I believe my opponent won the lieutenant role and decided to go first. Here is his deployment. He has a motorized bounty hunter here, flashball spot here, total reaction bot there. This is a clockmaker. You can't see it, but I believe there is a missile launcher bot there. This is a cheer killer. This is a chill killer. They're both on DZ defense duties. This is the puppet master, completely safe up there. I'm not getting to him. One puppet bot is there. Another puppet bot is there. This is its interventor. This is the bot for the clockmaker. This is another flash pulse bot. This is another motorized bounty hunter. And you can only kind of see them, but this is a heckler. I believe this is the heckler with the fast panda, and then this is the heckler with the killer hacking device. Finally, his reserve piece was the Salamandra, which he has put right up here, both to be an oppressive ARO piece and also to take some shots. He has noticed that the Salamandra can see Phoenix because the Salamandra is so tall, and so the Salamandra is going up there in order to take that fight. Meanwhile, here is my deployment. You'll notice that everything has gone down except the Salamandra, so I didn't know the Salamandra was going to go there, and here's what I have. I have a War Core here, a Flashball spot here, a Flashball spot here. Then I have Oideros, Myrmidon. I think this is Akmon over here, so they're a team. I then have Myrmidon. I think this is another Myrmidon, Phoenix, and Machaon. Machaon was my withheld piece. Then you have a Netrod and another Netrod. Not able to be seen are my Agema and Atalanta. Atalanta is actually right here, watching a vast amount of the board, and the Agema is in this position. The idea with the Agema in this position is that he can see all the way over here, including this doorway, so if the puppets try to move through, I can dump a missile on them. Meanwhile, Atalanta is present here watching everything, so if somebody does try to run up and push a button, she can reveal and snipe and kill them if necessary, and also this is a good spot for her to, shoot at the opposition. Along with all that, I've tried to put flash pulses watching generally as many long-range lanes as I can. The War Core can see like through here. This guy can see through that way. This flash pulse spot can see through this way. Phoenix can see that direction, etc. So I'm doing a lot of like crisscross fire lanes without actually making it so that you can, see right into the enemy DC with anything other than my hidden deployment guys. I've seen everything except the Salamander at this point, and, given that the Salamander is so expensive, I do suspect one is coming, so I don't want to be too aggressive in my ARO, and I think I more or less accomplished that. The only other thing to remark is that Machaon was my withheld piece. The idea with that is that I know my opponent will identify Machaon as an obvious lieutenant, and either this Heckler or this Heckler could, in principle, run up, drop a fast panda on me, and then start brutalizing me with guided missiles. Between the two Hecklers, this one over here is in the same group as the guided missile bot. Thus, I am a little bit less scared of it. If my opponent takes that Heckler, which is in the guided missile group, runs over here and spends like 2-3 orders putting a fast panda down here, sure, the Interventor can start spotlighting me, but he won't have as many orders in which to actually kill things with the guided missile bot. With a little bit of luck, I can restrict my losses to just Machaon, which would be lost lieutenant, which would stink, maybe Machaon and Phoenix, which would really, really stink, but hopefully nothing more than that. As it would happen, this thinking is sound because it turns out that this Heckler over here is the one with the fast panda. It's not both of them, it's just this one, and thus Machaon is relatively safe from him. So with all that in mind, it is now my opponent's turn, and what does he do? Well, the first thing he's going to do is take the Salamandra, who, as I've mentioned, can see Phoenix. I didn't intend for Phoenix to be seen, so this is kind of annoying, but he's going to just light up Phoenix with the ATRMC and hope to get lucky. I can't remember if Phoenix gets smoked down in one order or if it takes two, but I do recall that Phoenix is able to shut down the line of fire of the Salamandra without shutting down his ability to arrow anywhere else. That being done, my opponent does a little bit more maneuvering. I can't remember exactly with what. I think maybe this guy advances and maybe this guy advances. But before spending too many orders doing that, he then tries to go for a fast panda delivery with this guy. This is his Heckler with the fast panda. To do that, though, he has got to get across the entire board in this direction, drawing line of fire from guys like Oideros here and the flashball spot over there. His route is, I think, to go this way, then this way, and unfortunately for him, he gets discovered here, and then as he's moving through the objective room, here I reveal Atalanta, take the shot, and kill him. Here, I believe, is the board state. The Heckler would have been right here. Atalanta reveals she's in good range. She's on 18s. I think the Heckler even had moved there as a second short skill, so he doesn't even get to arrow, and all Atalanta has to do is hit him and deal one wound, and he shocks him off the table. This is exactly what I was hoping Atalanta would be able to do, putting her right there, so I'm happy to see it happen. At this point, my opponent realizes that he needs to take out Atalanta, and to do that, he has to get his Salamandra, who is up here, needs to get him downstairs. What he's going to do is entire order climb to here, and then walk from here across to this position. Unfortunately for my opponent, somewhere in the process, he is going to draw a line of fire through this position to my Agema marksman. I don't think it's on climbing down. I would have really liked that free shot. I think it's walking across here. But at some point along the line, the Agema is going to see the Salamandra out of cover. It turns out we're at 44 inches or something like that, so my Agema is shooting only on a 10, but he is able to splash the FO puppet bot who is here, and I am able to take out the FO puppet bot. I actually win the face-to-face against the Salamandra, I think, and the Salamandra ends up taking 2, maybe even 3 wounds. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a real big win for me. Next, my opponent takes the now wounded Salamandra and tries to gunfight Atalanta, who is way over here. And again, I think what happens is Atalanta like crits or wins the face-to-face or something like that, and the Salamandra is knocked unconscious. Again, that's really good for me. My opponent is able to spend his last order running the Clockmaker over here and shooting Burst 2 Gizmo kits into the Salamandra, so it ends up having 1 wound and not being unconscious at the end of the turn, but things have still gone quite well for my hidden deployment arrow pieces. So yeah, here is approximately what my opponent's board state looks like at the end of his first turn. 2 dead of his pieces, very few wounds, if any, on mine. All told, things are looking good. Unfortunately for me, this is also very approximately what things are going to look like at the end of my turn. What I have is a heavily wounded Salamandra who is just about the only piece left in my opponent's list that can threaten me. All I have to do is take him out, and I have got Atalanta and 10 orders with which to do it. I actually sort of have a little bit more than 10 orders, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Agema first. I have to throw smoke for Atalanta, but once the smoke's down, I might as well bring the Agema up and take a pot shot with the Agema. Who knows, if it wins the face-to-face, it might work, and I can splash this cheer killer. Using this picture to demonstrate it, the Salamander is going to be like right here. I will end up bringing my Agema up to this position, throwing smoke maybe like right there, and then having Atalanta run back to here to take shots from beyond 32 inches. So how did this go? Well, getting smoke down is no problem. Between NCO and tactical awareness, I am able to have my conventional Myrmidon throw smoke down using only one of my orders and leave that team in a relatively stable position. I've then got 5 orders in Group 2 with which to run my Agema up. I think it takes 3 orders to get into position before he can fire. He lines up on the Salamandra. The Salamandra is at bad range. I'm in good range. The Salamandra is at -6 for smoke. But we're both only burst 1 versus burst 1, and the Agema loses the face-to-face roll and dies. He actually does hit, but the, what's his name? The cheer killer is able to dodge the hit, and thus nothing is accomplished except my Agema dying. Now, this possibility was absolutely something I had in mind when I took the shot. In fact, I took the shot precisely because if someone was going to die, I wanted my Agema to die rather than Atalanta. Stated a little bit differently, if the Agema had gotten the job done and taken out the Salamandra, then I would have been able to take out the Salamandra without putting Atalanta at risk. But obviously that didn't happen. The Agema died, and the lesson that we've learned is that the Agema missile launcher is simply not reliable as an active turn shooter. Maybe you can take some pot shots and those will be nice, but you can't count on him to take out enemy ARO pieces without a strong risk of him dying. I thought that was true on paper when I was building the list, but it is validating to see that play out in gameplay. Next up is Atalanta versus the tag, and that interaction is also one that I am aware of on paper, but which again is validating to see in gameplay. Specifically, what happens is Atalanta, despite having smoke and range, spends something like 6 orders shooting the tag and not accomplishing anything. Now, if you look here, I have presented the odds of Atalanta shooting at the tag with the tag at a -9, and we can see that she has about a 56% chance of at least doing 1 wound per order. Thus, failing to do even 1 wound to the tag over the span of 6 orders is pretty outrageously unlikely. I mean, it can happen, and it did happen, but I don't think that that's the kind of level of probabilities that you want to build your list game plan around. However, it does bring to mind a more reasonable scenario which you should consider, which is, what if the Salamandra had had full wounds? Well, in that case, it could very well be that Atalanta spends 6 orders shooting at the tag and maybe wounds it a couple of times, but does not take it out. Moreover, over those 6 orders, Atalanta has something like a 26% chance of either getting knocked out or killed herself in the process. Thus, while her odds of success are very, very good in any single order, if the task at hand requires multiple orders for her, she stands an increasingly good chance of dying before she accomplishes it. In other words, I don't think it's a good idea to put hidden deployment Atalanta in Group 1. For starters, being in Group 1 and hidden deployment is going to tax your offensive capability, which is something I've complained about at length in other videos. And continuing, more importantly, if the job requires her to have 10 orders, then she's got a very good chance of dying before she accomplishes that job. If what you want is reliable success, then I think Atalanta is going to be approximately as reliable on 5 orders as she is with 10. Now that word approximately is, of course, very, very important. Specifically, having failed 6 times in a row, I look at my remaining order pool with Atalanta, and I look at the board state and think about what I need to do and decide, what the heck, I'm just going to hurl Atalanta at the Salamandra until I run out of orders or she dies. And that does work out. I think on order 8 or something like that, she does manage to knock the Salamandra unconscious, and this is a big boon for her. But one major reason that I decide to spend the orders on Atalanta is that this board is really well designed, and I don't want to spend like 2 or 3 orders running Oideros out here only for him to get stuck out here and eaten alive by the Salamandra. So I decide to shoot the Salamandra using Atalanta simply because I've got nothing better to do with my orders because I don't want to expose myself to too much risk. In other words, had this been a different game state, I'm not sure I would have used Atalanta, given that I had, 3 or 4 orders left on her. One other remark, you'll notice that the clockmaker is standing up here. It turns out that I'm able to draw line of fire from this building over here and kill the clockmaker. So one of those orders that Atalanta didn't kill the Salamandra, I didn't kill the Salamandra because I killed the clockmaker, and frankly, that's pretty big for me. When all was said and done, I'm 90% sure that I was able to take out the Salamandra and the Clockmaker and thus put myself in a really good position. Even if I hadn't taken out the Salamandra, though, I do kind of want to remark that my position is really solid. I have done the Steel Phalanx thing and basically castled up in my deployment zone. And at this point, with my opponent's Heckler Fast Panda dead, there isn't really a good way for him to use guided missiles to get at me. Instead, if I call correctly, what he does is he takes this TR bot, moves it up here, and takes some pot shots at people, and then moves this repeater up all the way through to this position in the hopes of drawing a bead on Atalanta. I don't know exactly how it susses out, but I can tell you Atalanta doesn't die, and my position is really solid at the end of my opponent's turn 2. Here's how things look at the end of my turn 2. What I have done is taken my Oideros, Myrmidon, Akmon team, run up to here to push this button, run over to here. I think I push the button in the center, and then I put both my Myrmidon and Oideros inside the room. Oideros is here, and the Myrmidon is here. What Gyro's done with this map is he has put 2 boxes inside the objective room, just to have it have a little bit of terrain. And by standing on top of these boxes and then going prone, I can be fairly safe. During this process, I can't recall, but I think I also do manage to take out the Heckler Killer Hacker was over here, and this denies my opponent another button pusher. Thus, at this point, I've got points in the room. I've got more buttons pressed than my opponent, or at least the same number of buttons pressed as my opponent, and I've had essentially no damage done to me except for the loss of the Agema missile launcher. It looks like I also had enough orders to put Phoenix on ARO duty here. That, again, is enabled to contest my opponent's ability to try to push buttons in the center. I don't have any pictures beyond this, but the game is pretty much over. My opponent does not have really any pieces to contest the room, and all he is going to do is take the Interventor, who is over here, run up to this position, and hope to guided missile both the Myrmidon and Oideros off the table. That's a tall order considering how ragged his groups are at this point, and even if he had succeeded, I would still be able to mop him up on my turn for the second part of the scoring using this team. I don't remember exactly who he kills, though. He does not manage to take out both the Myrmidon and Oideros, and thus I am able to score a pretty substantial victory at this stage. Thus ends round 4 of the Sectorial Cup. To give a high-level summary, I really liked this game because it allowed me to accomplish a lot of my goals for the Sectorial Cup. First and foremost, I got to see via an actual gameplay example something which I suspected on paper, which is that the Agema really cannot handle active turn gunning, and that Atalanta really doesn't want 10 orders of active turn gunning because she might not get the job done, or she might die before she accomplishes what she sets out to accomplish. Thus, while I may take either one of these pieces in the future, I think the hidden deployment guys are going to be relegated firmly to Group 2. Moreover, between the two, I'm leaning towards Atalanta simply because I think with Group 2 she can still do enough gunfighting to matter, whereas the Agema really is just going to be a trap card. Second, I got to see a more balanced version of the Vanilla Nomads Black Hole list, which was created by the fact that Vol restricted us to only sectorials. As I've talked about at length, SneakySnake's list is essentially what Vanilla Nomads looks like if you remove a whole bunch of those busted profiles that are kind of unfun to play against and replace them with more reasonable options like Cheer Killers and Motorized Bounty Hunters. That's not to say that restricting things to sectorials is the solution. I mean, my list is a sectorial and still has all those busted profiles from Big Boys. Instead, it shows off how by removing the busted pieces, or maybe by nerfing them so they're not as busted, you can get a game that has the same strategic elements, but which is more interactive and more fun to play against. That's exactly what Vol was trying to accomplish with his Sectorial Cup, and I'm really glad to have gotten to see it, especially in this game. Hopefully, you were also glad to see it in this game. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you around.